Hey everybody, it's Brooke with The Buttered Home and welcome to my messy kitchen. Today I have a very great old recipe for you. Now, my Gaga, my grandmother on my mother's side, was famous for her scalloped potatoes. So several years ago, I started making a variation of that recipe and added some delicious thinly sliced onions to that to make it a little more interesting. But the recipe essentially is the same. All we add is just the addition of the thinly sliced onions and a little bit of a panko topping on the top, or breadcrumb topping. You can use panko or you can use regular breadcrumbs. So we are going to share with you one of our beloved Gaga's easy recipes for the best scalloped potatoes and onions you will ever have. So let's show you how to do it. So in my pan, I have 3 tablespoons of butter and about a tablespoon of olive oil. And we're just gonna run that on medium-high heat until that butter melts. And then we will lower the heat to medium-low because we don't want this to cook too fast, and you'll see why in just a minute. And like every good recipe for a scratch-made casserole, this one starts with a white roux. And I'm having trouble getting my butter to adhere to my whisk so that I can move it around to melt it. Nothing ever goes right whenever you need it to. All right, so we're just gonna toss it around in there so that we can get that bottom of that pan covered pretty well. Okay, so it's good and melted, so I'm gonna lower my heat now to about medium-low. And then to this, all we do is add about 3 tablespoons of flour. And this is just your basic roux recipe. And you want that flour to soak up that butter and olive oil, and you want it to just simmer and cook for just a minute, just to cook off that flour taste. And this is our white sauce or white roux base for this casserole. We'll add the other flavor components to this after we add the. We'll let it cook for just a few seconds more until I can no longer smell the flour. So if you don't put seasonings in at this point, you want to rely on your nose to tell you when you start to smell the butter and not smell the flour. And I start to smell the butter. So now we're going to drizzle in 3 cups of milk. Slowly, because you don't want it to splash up and get on you, because that butter and flour mixture is hot, hot, hot. Now I've upped my heat just a bit to about medium so that we can get this to thicken just a little bit faster. And it shouldn't take very long. But this is going to be our cream sauce or our white roux for the scalloped potatoes. Now while that is starting to come to a simmer, I like to add just a little bit of grated nutmeg, not much. You really want the nutmeg to drop in there just like that, just like I did. Just to accentuate the creaminess. Now I know it's hard for you people who don't like nutmeg to think about nutmeg being creamy, but it does have a creamy, caramelly taste to it. So whenever you use just a pinch of it in recipes like this, it's only there to accentuate the flavor. It's not there to taste like nutmeg. So it's really important when you're making a savory dish like this that sometimes you add that. And then we're gonna add probably about a 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon of salt, and then about 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. because this is almost like gravy. And we want to mix those flavor components in while we bring it up to thicken. Now you can do this at the butter and flour stage. However, with this amount of milk, I like to put it in during the milk stage because it does take a little bit longer to cook than if you're making just a smaller amount of sauce. But this is a large amount, so it's going to sit here and simmer to thicken for a bit longer. Now we're going to add in a teaspoon of minced garlic and a tablespoon of prepared horseradish. And these are also great flavor components, and if you're not a horseradish fan, you can feel free to leave that out. But it also adds a creamy zip to it. I won't say hot because it's just a tablespoon for the whole recipe, so it's not all that hot. And we're starting to get thick over here. So I'm just gonna move that around just a little bit more and let it simmer a bit. Meanwhile, here I have a cup of breadcrumbs and a teaspoon of parsley, and I have melted a tablespoon of butter. We're going to add that in and to make a lot of noise and just kind of lightly mix that up. This is our topping, so you just want to do a rough mix on there and just make sure those breadcrumbs kind of get all that butter in there. All right, we're good and thick now, so I'm going to turn my heat off and just test my roux with the back of a spoon. And I just like to pick it up like this and run my finger through it, and then I look to make sure that it still stands on each side and does not move or drip either way. This is also a good time to taste it to make sure it doesn't need any additional seasonings. And I tasted it, and it could use just a tad more salt. And we're using potatoes, so potatoes tend to soak up a good bit of that salt. So make sure that you start on the scant side with your salt and add it as needed once you get to this stage to taste it and test it. I'm gonna slide this up just a bit. And then we have a casserole dish here. I'm going to lightly spray it with a little non-stick oil, non-stick spray, not oil. Then we're going to spoon just a tad of that white roux on the bottom. And I'm gonna just move it around a little bit. Now we have half of a medium yellow onion here, and I've sliced it on the mandolin carefully, very thin. So now we just want to take a little bit of that onion and we're going to make a bottom layer and spread it out over the bottom of that dish on top of that roux mixture. I have taken 3 medium potatoes and done the same. See how thin they are? And I have rinsed these and soaked them in a little water just so that we would get that additional starch off so they wouldn't brown so fast. So if you have the time to do that, do take the time to do that. So now we're gonna just take some of those, and it doesn't matter if they overlap because we used 3 of those potatoes and we sliced them all pretty thin. And we're going to put those out on the bottom. And slicing them really thin like this makes for a really good foundation, and it also holds this roux really well and allows it to kind of get into the skin of the potato. And you'll notice that I did not peel mine. Now you can peel yours if you want to, but I really like the additional color in here, as well as most all of the good nutrients that are in potatoes are in the skin. So I washed them really well and scrubbed them, and then I simply just used my mandolin and sliced them really thin. And now we're gonna take some more of that roux and spoon it over the top. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And then here we have a cup of shredded cheddar cheese. So we just want to put like a scant amount. I'm probably using about 2 tablespoons on each layer because we want to make sure that we have enough for the top. So now we start over. We add another layer of onion. And typically in a 9x13 casserole dish, this will make about 3 layers. Then we're going to put those potatoes on top of there. And if some of them are curly, that's okay too. It adds a little character. And if you wanted to, you could use this recipe and make 2 dishes of this and freeze one to have for later. I'm just going to try to fill in the gaps here. And then more roux on top. And this helps soften those potatoes because this roux we're putting it in is good and hot. And oh, I smell that garlic and horseradish. And it really is delicious. And if you're not a fan of horseradish, try it. Just give it a try in a recipe like this because it's honestly, it's the thing that takes this from bland to absolutely wonderful. All right, now our cheese layer. And I want to reserve a good amount of cheese for our top layer. And what's great about this is if you have some potatoes like this left over, you can simply drop these in some boiling water and blanch them, then wrap them up real tight and you can freeze them and have potatoes for later. And I skipped a layer of onion. So this layer is going to be a little bit different. It's going to have onion on top. Oh, I just got the cue from my producer over here that I forgot the onion. So don't do like me. Pay attention to what you're doing. And so we'll make this layer interesting. We'll put those potatoes on there and then we'll put our onions on. And that's the great thing about cooking is that there is no one right way to do everything. You can pivot and do something a little bit different and nobody will be the wiser because this is all gonna cook up nice together and be perfect no matter how you layer it. So just a tad more cheese on that layer. And then because I flubbed the dub on the onion, we're gonna end with a potato layer on the top to hold all that beautiful onion in. And you know, it may be really good that we ended with that onion on top because then the potatoes, these potatoes that are on top can soak up that onion. So you might wanna mess up like I messed up for added flavor. See, nothing happens by accident. All right, we just want to make sure that onion layer is good and covered. Then I am going to take the rest of my roux and pour it over the top. Just every last bit of it. Doesn't matter if it's a bunch. We're just gonna pour it over the top and get it all in there and use every bit of that good stuff. Then I'll just take and just kind of spread it out with my whisk to make sure it's all good and covered. And this may seem like a lot of steps, but I promise you it's worth it. Oh, it's so worth it. Now I'm just gonna pat those potatoes down so that that roux can get in all those little crevices and spread out. And when we cook this in the oven, all of that will kind of spread around as well. But you just wanna make sure that your edges are good and covered. Then we will add that last bit of cheese. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And then we will take our breadcrumbs and fill in where the cheese is not, because that'll add some texture. There, nice and pretty. And that's it. It's gorgeous, y'all. Gorgeous, gorgeous. So now what we'll do is we will pop this in a 375-degree oven from anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Just like a lot of our other recipes, I'm going to check it around 45 minutes just to make sure that it's doing what I want it to. And this is a lot like bread, that you can stick a knife in it and be able to tell if your potatoes are done, to be able to gauge if it's ready or not. But most times, somewhere between the 45 minute and 1 hour mark, this thing is beautiful and ready to eat. When it comes out, we'll let it sit for about 5 minutes just so it can kind of cool off and sit, and then we'll come back and we'll show you how to serve it. It's fantastic and beautiful. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, we are back. We have finished a 45-minute cook time, and it was nice and bubbly. I took it out and I just took my knife and stuck it in there to make sure that I could easily cut through those potatoes, and they were fine. That is a huge advantage to using a mandolin carefully and slicing those potatoes that thin, that you can go on the lower side of the cooking time. Now let's take a look at it and show you how pretty it is. Now my kitchen is kind of dark, so it may look kind of dark, but it's not burnt. It's perfectly browned on the top. And then we are just going to cut and scoop some out. And of course, I have it on a trivet, so it wants to wobble. I do have another trivet I could use, but oh, you've got all that white roux sauce in there and that cheesy goodness. And it is just, well, for one, it is hot, hot. But that roux kind of melted in there, and the cheese did too, and it is glorious. Look how pretty. It's steaming hot right now, but I'm just gonna kind of cut through and show you just a little bit of that. We'll get a little onion and a little potato, and it's fantastic. I can almost see the light through those potatoes. They're so thin. This white sauce with just a hint of that nutmeg, it doesn't taste like nutmeg, but it has, between that and the horseradish sauce, a creamy warmth to it. So I challenge you, if you're not a fan of those two ingredients, try them in this application, because you might find that in its entirety it turns into something that you really, really do like. And it's just such small amounts, it goes a long way, and it really adds a real pop of flavor to the dish. So this is our version of scalloped potatoes and onions in honor of my late Gaga. So I hope you enjoy it, I hope you make it, and I hope you send me a picture, because I love pictures of food. And as always, be sure and head over to our website at thebutteredhome.com, where this recipe and all of our recipes can be found there in nice, free, printable form. Also, if you're not already, make sure that you're following us on our social channels at Facebook and Instagram. We cook live there some Monday nights, and you want to be in the know for that, so subscribe to those channels as well. And as usual, if you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, make sure that you do that now, and that you ding the bell so that you can be notified when we drop new videos like this one. We've got lots of great stuff coming up for you, so make sure that you stay tuned and subscribe to all of our channels so you can be in the know whenever we share recipes like this one. So from the buttered home to your home, we love you guys. Bye.